Welcome everybody to the Evergreen Indiana Cataloging Roundtable. This is called MARC for Newbies. My name is Shelley Lesandrini and I'm from the Westfield, Washington Township Public Library. And the purpose of our Cataloging Roundtable today is to help our new Evergreen Indiana cataloging friends to create and edit records. I know there's a lot of new members out there who are brand new to cataloging and may not have a complete or full understanding of how MARC records work. And a lot of you have been doing this for years, and so this is going to be a lot of a lot of repeat information for you. But hopefully you'll all learn something new and have something to take away from today's presentation. A little bit about myself. I've been a cataloger for over 25 years and have been having a lot of work to learn RDA, and I will let you all know that I am not an expert by any means. I have to look up a lot of information that I don't see frequently, and with this presentation I'm hoping to show you all a little bit about what we see and encounter, and a lot of the explanations as to why we do what we do. So let's get started. Here on the first screen is what is a MARC record? Well, basically it's for machine readable cataloging. And essentially what you're doing is you're telling the computer what's what. The computer only knows what you're telling it, and so by putting the information into the correct fields, the computer knows how to sort that information so that the patrons are able to search for that information. It's only telling you what, or you're telling it, it's only going to know what you're telling it. So if you look at this first screen, this Stephen King Finders Keepers screen, you'll see that the information is sorted, and we've all seen these records, by a 100 field that's got the author's name in it, and the 245 has the title and the author's name, and so on and so forth. You see that this is also a audiobook screen, and it's telling you information about that audiobook. And this is, if you need to refer to a great RDA audiobook record, this is one to refer to. But we're going to go in a little more depth and to the next screen, where back in the day with what is a catalog card and what it tells us. By using MARC records, or by using MARC, the computer can organize the information just like how we used to type the cards up manually, where you have an author card, a title card, and all the accompanying subject cards. And they're all typed up in the same format, and that's what MARC is telling the computer to do today, is to organize this information to make it easier for the patrons to find that. So cataloging in a nutshell. Cataloging record is also synonymous with bibliographic record. That is the information that is in the catalog that explains or describes the item that you have in hand. So that term is going to be used frequently. It means the same thing, cataloging record or bibliographic record. The information it includes the following, but not really necessarily in that correct order. The description of the item first. That is the thing that you are holding in your hand. That is what's going to, that's primarily the primary information that you're looking at is describing that item. It's also going to contain the main entry and the added entry. These are the author title. These are the people who are responsible for that title. Those are your main and your added entries. Subject headings are descripting or telling the patron, I know I'm looking for this book about this subject. And then finally the classification or the call number, and we won't talk about that really, because call numbers are a local locally used. Some libraries use 920 for a biography. My library uses B. So your call numbers are going to be more of a local issue and not so much a standardized issue, which when we're talking about a bibliographical record, that's pretty much standardized. So let's get into the meat of a basic MARC record, or the terms that we use when we're talking about MARC. The first thing you're going to run into is field, and this is the term that is used to describe the various sections of the cataloging information. And when you follow cataloging rules, each area of information from the complete cataloging record is given a field in MARC. And from my little picture you have here, you have your 1XX fields. Those are your main entries, or the people or companies responsible for that piece of work. You have your 4XX and your 8XX fields, which are your series statements or your series added entry statements. Your 6XXs are going to be your subject headings. These are the things that describe or the subject matter which that item is about. Your 7XX fields are going to be your other added entries, which are going to be illustrators or actors in the DVD, other people associated with that item that aren't the main entry or the main person responsible for that item. So when you're looking then at a tag, that's that 3-digit number assigned to each field in a MARC record. And there are many tags that can be used, and often the tag indicates specific information about that field. So if you're looking at a 1XX field, you'll have a 100 tag for an author. You'll have a 110 tag for a corporate body. In a 600 fields, or the 6XX fields, you'll have the topical subject headings will have a 650. The geographical subject headings have a 651. So you see at the bottom of our screen here, we have a tag in our 2XX for the title statement, and that tag is a 245. And that indicates that the title of this book is The School Library Media Manager. That's your 245. In addition to your tags, you have the indicators. And those are the 2 spaces that follow each field in a MARC record. Those are the 1-digit codes that are listed right after the tag number. The first indicator is used to give the computer processing instructions. So in a 245, if there was a 0 in the first indicator, that would tell you that there is no title added entry. When you have a main entry, or a 1XX, then you would have a 1 in the first indicator in the 245. But if you don't have a 1XX field, you would use a 0, and that would tell the computer that there is no author, really primary person responsible for that item. The second indicator then gives you information about the content of that field. And in the 245, this number tells you how many non-filing characters are at the beginning of the title. For instance, if you see on the screen here that there's a 4 in that second indicator, which is telling the computer to skip over the first 4 spaces in that subfield A. You don't want to go looking for the word the, so it's going to skip over the. And there was a discussion on the listserv just recently as to why the first word in their title, subfield A, was cut in half. Well, there was a 4 in that second indicator, but there was no article such as the word the. So if you pretended that the word the wasn't in that 245 and you still had a 4 there, you're telling the computer to skip the first 4 letters of the word school. And then that's why the word was cut in half, is that they told the computer to do that. So if you don't have an article at the beginning of your title, you want to make sure that it's a 0. And make sure that each field, you want to remember that each field has its own indicators, and that the numbers, those indicators, will indicate different things depending upon your different tags in each specific area. So you see in our example below, the first indicator in a 100 field means something entirely different from the first indicator in the 245. the second indicators mean two entirely different things, whereas the second indicator in a 100 field does not, it's blank, it's no longer used. But the second indicator in a 245 indicates that those are non-filing characters. So the computer is going to ignore the word the. And then you also see one more thing in your 245 field. You'll see subfields. And these are the fields that contain pieces of information for MARC. And it's telling the computer that this is, you've got different parts. You've got an author, you've got a title, you may have a subtitle. These pieces of information need to be searchable in the library catalog, and that's why you have to make sure that these subfields are coded correctly. An example, if in this I had a subfield B for the author, her name would now no longer be searchable because you've got her name searching in a subfield B, which the computer knows is a subtitle. Well, that wouldn't be really good for a patron if they were looking for her name. So we want to make sure that the names are in the subfield C and that the title is in the subfield A, the subtitle B is in the subtitle is in the subfield B. I know we're getting a little redundant here. But some of the possible subfields in 245s are the title, subtitle, and the statement of responsibility. So you can see here that Blanche is in the C, the subfield A is indicating that that's the title, and the subfield C is our statement of responsibility. And down here at the bottom of the screen, you'll see, again, that the subfield codes are similar to indicators. Because they have the same letter, they may mean different things in the field. If we go back to our previous screen, the 100 field, the subfield A, doesn't mean title, but in the 245, the subfield A does mean title. So you've got different codes, different numbers, different meanings in each of the tags. And down here then you're going to have, I see this question frequently is, so how do I create these delimiters and where do I find the codes for all of these? In this next screen here you'll see down the second part here, the OCLC bib formats, is where you're going to find the different meanings for those different codes. What you see here in the yellow, I have done a screenshot of a 245 subfield codes from the bib formats. And there's telling you that the subfield A is a title, the subfield B is the remainder of the title, and so forth. And then for all of you who are trying to remember, when we go into a record, to create a delimiter in Evergreen, you want to press Control and D at the same time in the spot where you want your delimiter created. So if you're adding a subfield B in the 245, you want to go to the end of the subfield, or the last letters of the subfield A, and add your subfield B, and you would press Control and D at the same time. On to the description of the item. Now with AACR2 and RDA, we've got two different sets of rules, or we have two different ways of typing in the same information. So in the 260 or the 264 fields, those are your publication fields. The 300 or the 3XX is the same, it's the physical description, and then there are the 5XX fields, or your note fields. What we need to do is we need to use these tags to describe the item that you're touching. That way the next person that comes along on that record can tell, is it the same, is it different? And I check everything when I catalog an item. I check the pagination, I check the date, I check, are there illustrations? The 500 fields, is there really a bibliography attached to this record or not? So make sure you get these things correct when you're editing or creating a record, so that we don't have to, the next person doesn't have to be a mind reader. So a little further in depth on the 260s and the 264s. 260 is the AACR2 rule, and the 264 is the RDA rule. They tell us the same things, but they're using just a slightly different structure here. Notice that their punctuation is the same. We're using subfield A's. We're using a colon after the subfield A in all of these guys. Subfield B's. Oops, see, I made a typo here. That should be a comma. Commas after the subfield B. And then your subfield C's are going to be your date. The same in both RDA and AACR2. They're similar, and yet they are different. And the reason why they are different is the point of RDA was to be a little more explanatory to a patron. For example, the 260, if you didn't have the place of publication, you would use this, help me out here, Sine Loco, I think that's how you pronounce it. Or you would use, if you didn't know the publisher, you would use Sine Nomine if you didn't know the publisher, and you would put that information in brackets. The reason for the brackets was that it was not on the title page, and therefore that information was your best guess. So if you notice in this 264, I'm going to make the assumption that Dutton was the only thing about the publisher information that was on the title page. New York was not on the title page, and 2015 was not on the title page. It could have been on the verso, and that's where I got my information, but I had to bracket it because it was not on the title page. Something I just saw cataloging yesterday. In a RDA record, somebody had typed in the Sine Loco and the Sine Nomine, the SL and the SN, in a 264, which we don't use that in RDA, guys, because the patrons aren't going to know what that means. So we want to be as clear as we can to the patron and to the next cataloger. I've been cataloging a lot of these self-published Minecraft books lately. There are no publication information whatsoever. There is sometimes a date on the verso or maybe in the back of the book, but there's been absolutely no other information in there. And so this is how you would enter that if you did not know any of that information. Place of publication not identified in the brackets, publisher not identified in the brackets. Okay, I've got a comment from Sarah that says you don't have to put the bracket info from the verso in RDA. So I stand corrected. See, I told you guys I don't know everything. I tend to put it in brackets just because I didn't know, or if it's not there anywhere, you would put it in brackets. For example, these Minecraft books, there's something in the back that says it was distributed by someone in, I think it's in Charleston, South Carolina, where the printer was. Well, that's not the publisher, and it was published last month, so I'm going to use that date because that's the best date I can go with, and that's why I would use the bracket. "300 fields in the fixed fields." You have, these are pretty common, these are pretty standard. The extent or the number of pages in the subfield A, that would also be your number of discs in a book on CD, or the fact that you have one disc in a DVD, that would be your extent. The subfield B would be other information or other physical details. Are there illustrations or genealogical tables? Is there sound? Is it in color or black and white? That's the information you find in the B. And then the dimensions. I have the CM listed at the end of this guy, and there's a little bit of discussion about using this abbreviation. We use it. But in DVDs, again, RDA is trying to standardize, and so they don't want to have a combination of inches and centimeters, but it's okay if you have, say, a measurement for a DVD in inches in the 300 subfield C. So
I prefer to use the centimeters just because RDA is trying to standardize it, but that's a judgment call. So if you want to just leave it as you find it, leave it as you find it. Change it if you want. But that's a little bit of the flexibility in RDA. Sometimes you'll see a subfield E in a 300 field, which would be accompanying material, a teacher's guide or a manual, booklets. When you have WEs, there's always an instruction booklet that would go in your subfield A. So at the bottom of the page, I've included a couple of different examples. And again, in RDA, they want things all spelled out. They want pages spelled out. They want color illustrations. They want it all spelled out. Where you see in AACR2, they've abbreviated things. The point of RDA is to make that clear so that everybody understands. And again, the punctuation is the same for both. Colon after subfield A, semicolon after subfield B. And then the punctuation at the end here, again, there's a point of, it depends what comes next when it's in RDA. But I don't think anybody's going to have a fit if you put a period or if you don't. Okay, hold your horses here. Wait a minute. How do I know if I'm looking at an AACR2 record or an RDA record? Well, your first clue is going to be if you've got those goofy looking 3XX fields. But the indicator to the computer here is in the fixed field screen under the description. And if you see an A in that field, that means that either A, it was originally an AACR2 record and maybe somebody edited to make it RDA. If you see that the body of the record looks like it's an RDA record, but you've got an A up there, go ahead and change it to I. Or if you see an I on there and somebody's edited the record to an AACR2, they've changed it back, then change it to A. The computer is, at one point in time, it's going to use this information in the fixed field, and we're going to help it along here by telling the computer, yes, look at the 264, don't look at the 260. So it's imperative that we get that information right. And since we're looking at this fixed field screen, again, this guy, I love this guy. There are Post-it notes all over my workstation of codes that I don't run into frequently, but I do occasionally. And I can't remember sometimes for a graphic novel. Does the 6 go in the content field or does the 6 go in the form field? And I have that on a Post-it note that tells me which one I use. So I don't have them all memorized. Book fixed fields. See, Anna's getting the pleasure here of seeing me wave my hands around pointing. I wish you guys could see this. But the DVD codes, AV codes, books on CD, you're going to see things in there that you don't see every day. You might see something that doesn't look right. And that's why it's really good to go back and double check if you see something that looks way out of whack. I wish I could have taken a picture of my workstation for you guys. You'd see these Post-it notes and little old pieces, fading pieces of paper of these things. Even cheat notes for Evergreen on how to create a field and how to add and insert a column and all that good stuff. And these things have been there. We've been on Evergreen nearly 6 years now, and there's times when I'm like, how do I do that? And that's what my Post-it notes are all about. So while we're talking about the fixed fields, I hope some of you had the pleasure of going to the annual conference because we had some great presentations on the fixed fields, and I believe there's one also on the State Library site in the educational section that is a great in-depth explanation of the MARC fixed fields. I'm just going to lightly touch upon them. These are things that the 008 field, and if we go back and look at a MARC record, which there's your 008. Sometimes you'll see some old MARC records that don't have that field in there. And the best way I can explain to you to get that or add that 008 field, because if this field isn't in there, you can't edit up here. And the reason you can't edit up here is because there is no 008. So a lot of times what I'll do is when I find an old bib record that I've got and I still have the material and there's not a better record out there, I have to fix or clean that record up. What I'll do is I'll come in and I'll create a new book record, and I will just go to the flat screen text editor and I will just copy this field, the 008, and then I will go over to my other bib record. I'm not going to insert it here because I don't want to screw this record up, but I would insert it right here, and then when I went in to edit my record, I could correct it. I could edit all these fields, and that information, as you can see here, represents or follows what's in this record here. You see you've got your NYU, that's where the book was published. You got your ENG, that's the language, your 2015, your date. Oh, I'd have to look at the OCLC to figure out what that abbreviation stands for. See, I don't remember that, but I know that that's the type of the date. So I have the S, there's my S. So anytime you have an issue where you can't edit this or you're having trouble, take a look for that 008. That'll be a dead giveaway. If there's no 08 in there, you can't edit it. And in the Evergreen software, the fixed field information is used with the search filters in the main search input screen. Let's go to a new window. So in your advanced search screen, anything in that fixed field, and again, I'm not going in depth, but if it's all coded correctly, you should be able to do a book search because of that. Let's go back here to this guy. Nope, let's not look for a book. Let's look for a book on CD because of the type. If it's coded correctly, your icon and your type will be able to use that search filter. But here we go. You will be able to use these guys to do your search filters. A problem I've been encountering lately, and this is a project I'm working on, is that a lot of my older audio-visual materials, when we migrated to Evergreen, did not have those correct fields in them. So there's no icon. You can't search for them by CD or DVD because my old catalog or the database that we used before we transferred didn't use this information. It's not in the record. So I'm having to go back and add 007s, 008s, and make sure this coding's right so that my patrons can search for that information and search for that CD. I've just cleaned up a bunch of John Cougar Mellencamp CDs that transferred over. If you searched for Mellencamp, they wouldn't show up. Or Mellencamp and CD, they would not show up. If you did a search for Mellencamp, they would, but then you'd get everything else, your movies, the CDs, biographies. I didn't want that. I just wanted the CDs, and they didn't come up because I searched for them, but because that record wasn't coded correctly, they didn't come up. So Evergreen is one of the few systems that uses these fixed fields, and those fixed fields give you your icons when you're searching in Evergreen. And again, there were some excellent programs, and they should be either on their way to being on the website, on the State Library website, on the Evergreen Education, or they may be there already. So I love those guys. Okay, let's go back to our little guy here that we're cataloging. And I know you guys won't be able to see this information because I'm going to go into creating a record. I'm going to turn off the flat text editor. So when I'm going to go input this information, I've got this Blanche Wool's book in my hands, and I know she's the main entry. The second indicator is not used any longer, and I'm going to type in her name. See, I printed this off, and I have a copy of this posted under my blotter at work on my desk. So if I forget these things, there it is. And I guess I don't need to do that any longer. But there you go, guys. There's your cheat sheet. You can always print this off and put it on a Post-it note next to your workstation. All right, 245. I'm going to put a 1 in this field because I have a 100 field. If I didn't, I would put a 0 there. And the first word of my author or my title is the, so I'm going to put a 4 in that field. The school. All right. Now, I'm not going to make a space. Well, I guess I am. I've got to put that backward slash in there because that's the end of my title. But I'm not going to space. I'm just going to do a Control-D right there. It inserts the space automatically. And then I'm going to put in Blanche's name. Now, we know it's an RDA record. It's 264. New York was not on the title page. I'm going to tab over. Dutton was on the title page. And we'll put 2015 here. We also know that we've got 300 pages. I'm going to put a colon, space over. It had color illustrations. And it was 24 centimeters. Okay, the reason I'm showing you this, and I'm sure you've all done this before, but again, this is where your fixed fields have to reflect the content or the description of your book. This is where, so we know it was in New York, so we're going to go up here and we're going to put NYU up here. And there's a controlled list of abbreviations again on the OCLC bibliographic format site that'll tell you which, if you run across a country that you don't know the abbreviation for, there's a whole listing of those in there. We know it's an adult book, so I'm going to put an E in there. I just happen to know that. It's a nonfiction book. I'm going to put a 0 in there. I don't know if there's an index yet because we haven't gotten that far. And we're going to put 2015, and I know there's an illustration. So anyways, guys, just make sure your fixed field represents what you've got typed in here. I'm going to make a 1 there, and I'm going to come down here and add it. It does include an index. So any questions so far about how you match your content or your description here with your fixed fields? But I have to tell you all, I had some, while we're waiting for the typing to come up, I just want everybody to know I had some excellent instructors and mentors as I was learning cataloging and even beyond library school. And they just drilled this into me that things have to be, you're just telling the computer exactly what it's going to do, and if you get it wrong, the computer doesn't know it's wrong. And so just make sure you've got things. I have to thank all my instructors and mentors over the years. But here's our question now. In my cataloging class last semester, I learned that we were supposed to put a second 264 for copyright date, and the first 264 is at the publication date. Is that right? In RDA, yes, that is correct. If there are multiple dates, say in this example, let's create. See, I keep doing that wrong. I need my cheat sheet. If we had a 264, and I'm going to call it a 4 just for our example here. It had 215 on the title page, but on the verso it had copyright 2014. You would put it on this, in this 264 in the subfield for a 2014. So I'm going to put that here. And I know there's a There's a symbol, or somebody help me out here. Or a subfield C. That's right. I do have that wrong. Thank you, Jocelyn. See, it takes a village here, guys. But then you would also have to come up here and change this because you have multiple letters. It's not C anymore. See, I'm old school, guys. And then you would come over here and put your 2014. I've got some helpers here on the chat room. You can get the symbol from the character map too. I have tried that Alt plus 0169 for the copyright symbol. For whatever reason, I can't make that work. I have seen it that on our upcoming recertification for Cat 1 class that is mentioned in that presentation. And so I was trying to make that work, guys, but I couldn't get it to work. I can't wait for this class to come up so I can learn how to make it work. But at this point, just maybe for our use here, but yes, Catherine, your question about the two separate dates, yes, you are correct. In 264, that is correct. The next important thing I want you guys to all look at is your series statements, or your 400 or your 4XX fields. In Evergreen, we are using the 490 as a series statement, and your first indicator in the 490 specifies whether or not the series is traced. And the first question you're going to say is, how do I know if it's traced? What I do is I go and I look for the previous title in the series and see how that bid record was cataloged, how was that series handled, and I just cut and paste from that record and just change the numbers. So if I had the next book in the Jackie Collins Lucky Santangelo series, number 10, but there were no 490s, there were no 800s in that, I would go look for the previous ones and see how they were done. That's usually a pretty easy, that is a whole lot easier to check those things now than it used to be, where we'd have to go wander out to the catalog card and see what was on the previous title and how was it traced, and then write it down and then come back to your terminal. So I have no problem checking these on the computer. I take the time because, wow, it's just so much shorter now than it used to be. What does traced mean? Very good question. Back in the day, that this would be typed on a catalog card, so that if you knew the series of the title or the book, you could go and there would be a card there under Lucky Santangelo. In the day and computer now, it really is a lot easier to find series where it didn't used to be so easy. So I may be making a mountain out of a molehill anymore, but a lot of the patrons like to be able to find those series, and that's why we trace them. If you see at the bottom of my screen, you would, if it was a 490 and it had that information in there and a patron searched for that information, it would still be traced in today's world of keyword searches. Back in the day when we didn't have keyword searching, it wasn't possible. It just wasn't something that was going to be able to be found. But we like to be standardized, and that's why I say go look at the title, the previous one. So I would go look at Lucky Santangelo number 8 in the series by Jackie Collins, and they're usually listed in the book, or I will go just search her name and sort the books by newest to oldest to find the most recent Lucky Santangelo book, and just use that information to put in the next title of the series. But that's how they look. If there's not an author, you would use an 830, and in that case then we would have an 830 that just showed Lucky Santangelo. And I don't know if I have an example of that or not. I don't think I do. Sorry, guys. But again, your subfields, you've got your A's and your V's. V's mean something else in a different tag. than it does in a 490 or in the 800. So you just have to go look to figure out which, I can't remember what the volume. Well, this one's kind of, what's that word I'm looking for? Mnemonic? All right. And we continue on. 500, or the 5XX note fields. I just copy screened the OCLC bib formats list of their 500 fields, and if you were to go to that screen and you click on this guy, it would take you to the more specific 500 general note fields. Or if I was looking for, say, the target audience, how do I format that field? It's going to tell me exactly how to format and what subfields to use for the rated R, or how do I input this information in a 505 for the formatted content notes, usually like chapters. One thing of note about 500 notes is in Evergreen, I'm still seeing a lot of these input where people have put in memoriam or that this book was donated by so-and-so. Remember, you're using a consortium record. All of us are using these records. Those kind of notes are not to be in a bib record anymore. It used to be when you were a standalone library. That was fine. So please don't input any of those kinds of information in the 500 fields. Moving along to your 6XXs or your subject headings. I just had a question yesterday. A cataloger ran into a record that had some cataloging done to it, but it didn't have any subject headings. But she had the book in hand. She asked me, what do I do? Do I add these or do I just leave it? And I said, hey, you got the book. If you know what it's about, add them. You're creating information for your patrons to be able to find that item. But remember, when you're adding these subject headings, you're using a controlled vocabulary. And on this screen here, you'll see a whole list of places to find this controlled vocabulary. They're all online now, and I know I'm boring you all, but there used to be a whole series of these books where we'd have to go look it up. They're all on the click of the computer now these days. But make sure you're using these controlled vocabularies. It makes it much easier for people to find that same information. And unfortunately, we don't have an authority control which can clean this up, and we're working on that. Go, Jocelyn. But we're hopefully one of these days we'll get this controlled vocabulary under control. But please try and use things. There's going to be times where you're not going to be able to use an authorized subject heading. You're going to be cataloging a family genealogy book. That may or may not be a controlled subject heading, but that's what it's about. So go ahead and use it. You know, there's just going to be things you're going to run across that are not authorized headings. And again, one of the rules that I was always taught is when you're creating something from scratch, 3 subject headings, minimal. It could be as lame as when I'm cataloging the Harlequin romances, that I use the state of Montana as one of the, and fiction as 651. But at least there's something there so that when the patron's looking at that on the screen, oh, this is about Montana. Cool, I like that place. Hopefully I'm just helping the patron along. And here's some examples. A 600 is a personal name. A 650 is a topical term or just your general subjects, and a 651, geographical names. And you see here that we have a first indicator that should be blank. Again, my bad, but that should be blank. But in a 600, the first indicator, that tells us it's a name. But in a 650, that's a blank. We don't even use it. Or in 651s, those are blanks. And they mean your topical term is in your first subfield A. The form division, you'll see that with fiction or drama. Dictionaries, the general subdivisions, you've got history or administration. Chronologicals are always using Y's in These bad boys. Dates, that's his birth and death date. So a Y and a D are a little bit different. And then your geographical subdivision in this guy, your United States. So make sure you use those things. Remember, these guys are searchable, so you want to be able to use this controlled vocabulary. And this is another guy I have bookmarked on my screen, as the authorities. If I'm creating something new, I want to double check and make sure that it's okay. The 7XX fields. These guys are added entries or added added names, people, other people responsible. You'll see a huge list of 700 fields in movies where they've got the actors and the director and the producer, and everybody's listed in the 700 field. You want to make sure that they have their listing then there too. If you've got multiple actors and somebody's looking for all of the Robert Downey Jr. DVDs, but he wasn't the person responsible, at least we'll be able to find him that way. And finally, here is a screen of our school library manager, and there's a couple things I wanted to point out to you here. There are some subject headings down here at the bottom, and I mispronounce them on purpose because I don't like them, but but that's not a reason to get rid of them. So if you see those things in there, leave them in there, and then you'll usually see an accompanying 084 field, which would be the classifications for these guys. Some people, I don't know if there's anybody in the state using them. Yeah, Anna says there are some libraries in the state using these guys. So again, leave them in there. You're helping those libraries out. Someday more people may be using them. Just because we don't know that we don't use them or you don't know what they mean doesn't mean you get rid of them. So go ahead and leave those bad boys in there. Another thing you can see in here is there's a 240 field in this record. That this book at one time was called the School Library Media Manager as opposed to the School Library Manager. Maybe the patron doesn't know that the title changed from the 4th to the 5th edition. So they're looking for this other title, and this will help them stumble upon, oh, there's a new edition. That's what it's called now. So it's just giving you a reference or a link to both titles so that the patron can find it. A 240 would be an alternate title. You'll see 740s, which could be other titles associated with this guy. Ones I've been encountering lately are some of these dual titles in a Harlequin romance where they've given it a uniform title, and then there's two separate titles that were previously published. So we have to make sure that all of those titles are associated with that guy. You would add 740s for that one. What else do I see? Oh, I see 504, bibliographical references and indexes. They're in my fixed field. Here we are representing again. Content field with a B. That means tells the computer that there's bib references. 1 in the index. That's indicating to the computer, gosh, this bad boy has an index too. So just make sure, again, everything down here represents everything up here. One more thing, and I kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you aren't sure of what you're looking at, don't change it, don't delete it. If you're in doubt, just leave it. If it's bothering you severely, email it. Put it on the list serve, and I'll have all that information here in a minute at the end of the presentation. So either leave it or send me an email, send me one on the list serve, address me that way. Look at this, what do I do? How do I find that? And I'll help you out. I've got a comment here. Why are there blank spaces before the LCCN in field 010? That's just how it's formatted. She's talking about these spaces in here. Honestly, I don't know why, and I would go look in the OCLC bib formats to go find that information. I'm sure it's got something to do with the formatting for the computer, but that's a good question, and we can look that up. And here's my citations. These are some places. This first one I've listed here. This one and these two guys here, not the pink one, but the two blues. These were tutorials I found on the internet that I incorporated into this presentation. I didn't do it all from scratch. I found this information from lots of other places. So those are places to go. They were excellent presentations. They are a little dated. They do use some of the older rules, but you will find some helpful information on those guys if you want something else to look at. The guy in pink, there's my hero, the OCLC bib formats. And finally, down at the bottom, this is the website or the link to the Evergreen informational site where you can find all of those other tutorials or webinars that have been produced. Great information there. This presentation will one day make it to that site too. And another reminder here, guys, is that just keep a notebook. You can even use this presentation if you want me to email one to you in the next day or so. You can send me an email, and I will email it to you if you need to look at some good examples. This next screen for help. Here's your listserv. Probably everybody's on there, has looked at it, has seen things posted. Ask questions. You can put my name in the subject heading. Shelley, what do I do here? Please, guys, ask us questions. There's so many of us on the cataloging committee that have years and years of experience. Like I said, I don't know everything, but I can find out the answer for you. So I want to thank Anna for helping me out here. If anybody has any more questions, we've got the chat room open, and I'm going to pass it on over to Anna. Thanks, guys.